Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to The Book right here on adfreeshows.com. And today we welcome in a member of wrestling royalty, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Crockett. David, how are you, man?
Fine. How are you, Conrad?
Man, tickled. I'm so excited to be here with you. I have such a blast talking about the good old days of professional wrestling. And today we're talking about May of 1985. Man, you guys have just gotten more and more momentum through 85. You're back on TBS. You've expanded into the Northeast. This is as hot as JCP had maybe ever been so far, right?
Well, yeah, it's hot and then it's not. You know, when we start going, you'll look at towns, events that we ran that just sucked big time. And then there are those that did very well, you know, and it was trying to adapt to the WWF at the time and the requests for favors from other promoters. And then two, we inherited Georgia Championship Wrestling talent and area, try to keep that going separate. And, you know, and then Dusty in Florida, it was so, you need somebody to help you figure it out. Honestly, you know, sometimes you didn't know which way you were going, but hey, it started working. You know that we had to get used to TBS and just how far you can step up to the line. You know, before you step over the line, and we stepped over the line a couple of times, and so. You know, this TBS thing just started. Here it wasn't our best, but it was great to me. It did the job.
I can't wait to break all this down because it's such an exciting time. And before we get going, you know, I could sort of pick up what you're putting down there. I want to just ask straight up, do you think you guys were growing too fast?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we did too many favors. Let's put it that way.
Right.
You know, that we forgot about me and we kept on thinking about us. You know, and that was wrong. You know, if you have a stable, strong center, then, you know, you can help. But if you dilute that center, then it ends up nothing. And it became diluted.
I've often heard, quote unquote, top guys in the business say that every now and again, you've got to know when to be selfish or you'll never really reach the top of wrestling. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Nobody's going to take care of you except you. Right. And, you know, and we forgot about that. And two, I'm going to have to say, you know, I love my brother, but man, was he, you know, if he stopped real fast, there would be more heads up his ass. You know, they were blowing smoke his way big time. And, you know, hey, the ego, you know, for Jimmy, he was always, if you think about it, in the background, you know, until, you know, you had, you know, Dad, then he had Johnny Ringley, all right, who was he had the gift of gab. Jimmy did, never did, you know, but Johnny did. And, you know, that when Johnny became president, that's when Jimmy ran for state Senate because he said, well, I need to do something else, you know, but he lost that because that was around the Nixon period and all that stuff. So, but, you know, now his ego is being stroked and he was loving it. Just loving it. So, you know, and we had some successes and then, you know, he thought he was invincible.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. As they say, his shit didn't stink.
Right. Well, let's just remind everybody where we are. We're talking about May of 85. This is an episodic series, though. We're going to be revisiting Mr. David Crockett's brother, Jim Crockett Jr.'s Red Books. This is going to be the excellent penmanship of J.J. Dillon from the genius booking mind of Dusty Rhodes.
Yes.
You see right there. There it is. we've done this episodically. So if you haven't already, go back and watch January and February and March and April, and you hear about, how you guys were expanding into the Northeast, how you were able to land the deal back on TBS, what working with the McMahons was like, how WrestleMania became a thing, and how you guys are responding to that now that you're on national TV. Before we get started, I just want to highlight where the ratings have been, and we'll probably share a chart here. We go back to 1980, in May of 1980, and we're able to see that we've got 303,000 households watching. But cable television is still very much at the infancy. So it's a 3.8 rating, which is still incredible. But when you think about 303,000 households, not all that much. As you expand beyond the 8 million household network that cable is, by February of 83, so we'll call it 3 years later, there's 25 million folks who have cable television. And now the wrestling program on TBS has 1.725 million households. So we're talking a 6.9 rating. As we continue to expand into 84, we'll call it March of 84, there's a 6.0 rating for 1.75. And supposedly there's 29 million people with cable. And now here we are in May of 85, and we've got 1.462 million households watching your program. That's a 4.3 rating. I mean, those are numbers now. Because listen, when you talk about viewers, that's what people talk about now. They don't usually talk about the actual rating. And I'm glad we've moved away from that. We're talking about eyeballs now, because you can see it's subjective based on how many people have cable or how many people are cutting the cord. But we routinely see conversations about, hey, WWE passed 2 million people watching. Bravo. Hey, can AEW reach 1 million? Let's cross our fingers. Here in May of 85, you have roughly 2,300,000 and change people watching your program. And this is in 1985. I mean, overnight, this has to be a dramatic impact in the way your guys feel. A lot of them go from being, quote unquote, regional wrestlers to national television stars just with this deal in the last few months, right?
Yes. No matter where they went, I mean, even if they were, you've got to realize now, we were not flying all over the United States, and some of the wrestlers were, back and forth. And airlines, they always would get recognized in airports, restaurants, and it was a big deal to everyone. And today we're not considering. Still, in 1985, you had a lot of satellites. You think about America, the Midwest, that wasn't cable per se. Maybe the bigger cities had some cable, but when you start getting out in, let's say, the counties, there was no cable. So there's a bigger number there, and I could see what was going on. We started getting ratings or letters, from fans, and we would want them to write in, and people also in their travels, we'd say, hey, when summertime's coming up, or Easter vacation, Christmas, we're taping here at TBS, and we would love to have you. And, write in, we'll give you tickets and so forth. And it was huge. So Atlanta's the destination city, and so was our event taping there on Saturdays.
Were you getting any feedback from the Turner organization about ratings? And if so, when did that start? When did that begin?
Oh, it began as soon as we were on. That Jerry Hogan at that time was the executive vice president. He answered directly to Ted, and he would talk. He was there on Saturdays. He would be there and sort of watching and seeing what was going on. He would watch the program. Ted Turner would watch the program, and We would get feedback from different people about what Ted said. Basically, it was Jerry Hogan for the longest time, and they liked it, because it meant better ratings for baseball and everything else that we were leading into. See, that's what you've got to remember, that they looked at us to cum numbers to push their other sports.
I get that.
All right.
We've talked once upon a time with Mr. Jim Hurd over on Conversations with Conrad, and I'm sure we'll talk about him more some other time. But he made it clear that one of the things that was important to Turner was the way they would sort of package a sports buy. So a potential advertiser, let's call it M&M Mars, they might not get so specific as to say we want to be in this show or that show, but we want to be in this demo, aka men of a certain age or women of a certain age, and all that sort of thing. So we're looking for the sports category. So maybe they could buy Braves baseball, maybe they could buy the Atlanta Hawks basketball, but candidly, not as many people were often watching those programs as they were wrestling. And so
that's right.
If you're using a higher CPM for baseball and a higher CPM for basketball, but a lower CPM for wrestling, then you could say you're getting this many eyeballs for this much smaller CPM just by averaging it together, your cost per point. And that made a lot of sense to me. Do you believe they were doing that here, even back in 85?
Oh, yes. Yes. They would cum us, like I said, cum, they would combine us with their sports.
Yes.
Saturday Sports Spectacular, let's call it that. And they would go to the advertiser and say, this is what, we have, these are the demographics. And they don't ask what sports are in this thing. They say, oh, God, this is great. And boom, then we get, then they'd sell it and they would dump a lot of it into our program.
Well, let's get
I'm going to back up here. Jim Hurd, when he came in, that was, I think, the first time we had a true advertiser on wrestling, and we put the turnbuckles. We had the advertiser on the turnbuckles. That was one of the first times we did that. Well, they owned us, so they could do that.
Really, I think some of the marketing stuff that happened, the Ruse deal, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the future when we talk about that era with Mr. Hurd. That was a big deal, to have a shoe deal for years and years. That was something that wrestling, WWE has specifically wanted. But then, we've all heard that Vince really wanted a beer sponsor, and we know that the UFC has a beer sponsor, but WWE has never really had that. But even back then, you guys were wrapping the ring post for Coors Light. So there's some revolutionary advertising opportunities, but that's a story for another time. Let's jump into May here.
All right.
May 1st, we're going to get things kicked off at the CYO building in Trenton, New Jersey. There's a $3,000 gate. Earl Hebner is going to be your representative here. In the main event for the national title, it's Ryan Garvin taking on Tully Blanchard. Underneath, we've got Thunderbolt Patterson and Manny Fernandez taking on Arn and Ole Anderson. Trenton, New Jersey. You're still trying to establish yourself up there. And it even makes the Observer that, and this sounds like an educated guess, Dave would write, if you realize that in Philly, Crockett pays something like $3,000 to $5,000 per week just for TV, you realize they're dropping a bundle in the Northeast. Was that for your syndicated programs, and are you offsetting that with advertising, or is this just Dave taking a stab? Because that's quite a range there, $3,000 to $5,000.
It was our syndicated program.
Okay.
And that was advertising dollars. So yes, we pay $3,000 a week. But we turn around and in other words, they gave us credit for advertising. And so that $3,000 sit over there, and we promote our show, promote the event, promote other towns and so forth. That's what we use it for. Yes, in a lot of ways, we talked about expansion. Maybe we shouldn't have expanded there, but we did. So, that's what we had to do. Hindsight 2020? No, I'd rather not do it. I mean, because today they would buy it. I mean, look at TBS and AEW, you know, and all, and Vince and the stations that he's on, you know, that, yeah. And see, wrestling still had a stigma. You know, certain advertisers would not buy wrestling no matter what the ratings, you know, the viewers, they just wouldn't. U.S. Army, prime example. They wouldn't do us. Milk, they wouldn't do it. You know, we tried. No. You know, it's, even though you have the demographics, no. You know, it's not the caliber of entertainment that we want. There again, the stigma.
Well, let's jump into it. You know, we know that you're trying to expand in the Northeast, but the South is still home. So on May 1st, you're not just running New Jersey, you're also running Raleigh, North Carolina. There's $3,200 at the gate here. Sonny Fargo is going to be your representative. On top, we've got U.S. title, no DQ, Magnum TA versus Buddy Landell. Buddy Landell, man, right away, getting an opportunity, a sniff at the main events. You know, do you think in hindsight there was a bigger opportunity with Buddy had maybe some of his personal issues not reared their head?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And two, you know, it was $3,200. You know, it was just, I hate to say it, two bodies. There wasn't an angle, right. You know, that, you know, it would have been great. You know, a Buddy Landell, great personality, great talent. Yeah, if he just kept his mouth shut, so forth, you know, I could see the matches between he and Magnum would be fantastic. But, you know, there was no angle, so you just had two people wrestling. You know, you were counting on Magnum and their Nikita Koloff. That was really it. I mean, yeah, you had Johnny Weaver, Black Bart, you know, Ron Starr, Don Knodel.
It seems like Magnum and Nikita are probably your two biggest stars on this card. Nikita working with Don Knodel, and
yes,
they're in Huntington, West Virginia. We'll have Dusty Rhodes versus Ivan Koloff in the main event here, the Barbarian and the Boogie Woogie Man underneath. We've got a $6,500 gate. Tommy Young is on the duty here. The Northeast crew has bounced over from New Jersey down to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's about 400 fans in attendance paying $4,000. Earl Hebner is your rep. Ryan Garvin and Tully Blanchard on top again. But believe it or not, you've got the ability to run 3 shows. That North Carolina crew is now in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, once again with Magnum and Buddy Landell on top for the U.S. title. 3 shows here. This is a lot, man.
Well, you end up having a lot of talent. You have to put them to work.
Right.
You know, that, so you're running multiple towns because they don't work, they don't get paid. You got to realize that. You know, it's not, they can't, if they sat home, they wouldn't be paid. So put them to work. Now, as far as, you know, Huntington, that's not a bad trip. So they did fine. Township Auditorium, you know, even at, you know, $3,300, let's say. Oh, that's an hour away, you know, from Charlotte. So real short trip, you know. So they were making money, and Township Auditorium was a inexpensive building to run, you know, and it was all the time. So profit margin was good.
Talk to me a little bit about just the routing here and who's helping tackle that, because when you've got 3 crews running like this, and I should remind everybody that May 2nd, where we're running 3 towns, this is a Thursday. We're going to run a Friday loop, but it'll be Columbus, Ohio, Rockingham, North Carolina, Bassett, Virginia. And in hindsight, it feels like, and again, what do I know? Pittsburgh and Columbia might be bigger towns. I'm sure that's based on availability of the arenas. It's also based on just routing, how you're going to move the guys around. But as you're expanding like this, and you're no longer just running 1 town, and sometimes you're not even running 2 towns, now you're running 3. As far as your infrastructure, who's helping book the buildings and arrange the travel for the talent? And I mean, all just who's going where and what. There has to be more than just, hey, this is what me and Jimmy and JJ and Dusty did. Who are some of those other names that maybe we haven't heard?
Well, you had Gene Anderson in the office there. You had Gene, Sandy Scott, was there all the time, working with the booking. I did, as far as towns, when we were running 2 towns, I was doing that. And then I started working with the TV. So I started doing that full time. And then Jimmy started getting Sandy and Gene involved quite a lot, and to handle that whole end of it. And I would look at mainly where we're going to do TV, and if the building worked for us. Now, that was the problem, or not the problem. The challenge was that when we did television, local television, that it had to be close enough to where we could get back with the truck, plug the truck into the building, start dubbing tapes that night. The next morning, all the wrestlers had to be there to do interviews. We put the interviews into the shows, and then we ship all those shows, 82 stations we'd ship to, had to kick it out the door, so to speak, by Thursday at the latest. And it was UPS or FedEx. So that was crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah. To be able to do that, and then, getting the interviews right. Now, Gene Anderson was the guy on Wednesdays when we cut the interviews. He would coordinate who was going to do what interview, and we just crank them out. I had Wayne Daniels in the back of the truck, queuing up the tapes. Emerson Lawson was there in front. He was the TD, and I sat there and said, punch buttons. So,
I'm sure you're using local promoters as well. Who are some of the other local promoters you guys would have been leaning on pretty heavily in these individual towns or markets?
All right. In South Carolina, most of South Carolina was Henry Marcus from Columbia down. Then we handled everything from Columbia over, Greenville, South Carolina, Greenwood, Anderson. And then we had Asheville all the way over to Greensboro. Then we had the Murniks handled the eastern part of the state, and Virginia to Richmond. And then we would have not Nick Goulas. Nick Goulas was Knoxville. We had, oh God, I can see him. But we had another promoter there in that western part of Virginia.
So as you're working through these different local promoters, if you will, what strategies are they using back then? I mean, this is long before the internet, so it's not like they can do social media advertising or pay-per-click. Were you doing radio? Were you doing television? Obviously, you're running it inside your own program, but
right.
Locally, are they doing advertising schedules, or is it simply the old school, hey, let's go put posters up all over town and that sort of thing?
Well, we always did posters. We always did the newspaper, the sports section. And then we also did radio promotions, talk. We really didn't have that many talk shows, but morning and afternoon drive times. In the smaller communities, let's say we were talking about Bassett, that radio station there, that covered everything there in the local newspaper. So that was easy.
Did y'all have an agency you use for that, or are you guys just letting the local promoter decide what station?
The local promoters handled everything.
Okay.
We did do posters too, everywhere. Everywhere, posters. You can go online now and find a lot of those posters.
I've got some hanging in my office. They're really cool and it's fun to see. And the other thing that's different is these days you just press a button on your phone and you get a QR code and you've got your tickets. You just show them your phone and they scan it. This is the paper ticket era. And this is even before Ticketmaster has sort of taken over the world. did you have different outlets in each market? Like you can stop by
yes.
so and so and pick up tickets. Talk to us about that.
All right. All right. In Charlotte, it was the National Hat Shop. It was right uptown. They call it the Square. It's where North Tryon, South Tryon, would meet. All the buses were there. And any show that was either at Park Center or the Coliseum, that's where they sold their tickets. Izzy Silverstein was the owner of that. And then his son started doing it too once Izzy retired. But yeah, that's then, of course, they were on sale at, let's say, Park Center or the Coliseum. We had a couple of other outlets. It's just, who do you trust with your cash?
Right.
See, that's what you have to worry about. In Columbia, there was a drugstore that did it. In Raleigh, there were several places that did it because it was Dorton Arena, which is the fairgrounds, and that at that time was out in the middle of nowhere. So, and two, you've got to remember that most people, when they come to wrestling, they come from outside of the city. My dad always said, if they closed the roads down in Charlotte, we would not have anyone. That the people in Charlotte proper, they were not true wrestling fans, but everybody outside were definitely wrestling fans.
So did you and your brother view wrestling as something for rural folks? Like, was your target demographic a family perhaps who lived in a more rural community?
Not necessarily. When I say rural, Rock Hill, Gastonia around Charlotte, Kannapolis, that with the African American community, it was bus transportation. We would always, if we had an event at the Charlotte Coliseum, they call it Bojangles Arena now here in Charlotte.
Right.
We would make sure, and if we had to pay the city, to have buses sitting across the street to take fans to the central bus station so they could get home. Because, a lot of, people in the African American community did not have cars, per se. So, and you had to pay for parking. So, the buses were there, and that was mandated by my dad. It made perfectly good sense.
Well, it's fascinating to just hear how things used to be a little different. Let's talk about May 3rd. The weekend is here. It's Friday, and it looks like we got Manchester, Connecticut. We got Bob Roop and Ron Garvin booked out. We think this is probably through Bob Backlund, right? In spring.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that to me, I think, again, we were warehousing a lot of talent for other people. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. That Bob Roop, he wasn't always a main eventer here. Ron Garvin, definitely up and down. He was good. And then, he'd be a solid, close to top always. He was an excellent wrestler. Columbus, Ohio, you look at that, the fairgrounds.
$9,500 at the gate here. Dusty Rhodes and Ivan Koloff on top. Manny and Thunderbolt against Arn and Ole. I mean, that's a big deal, $9,500. And Rockingham, North Carolina, $9,100. That's got Magnum and Tully on top. That's a
high school. Think about it. That's a high school there.
Rockingham is a high school?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah, some of the high schools in North Carolina would seat 3,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, or more. I've seen some two-decker high schools. I think there's one in Marion, North Carolina. But yeah, it's an inexpensive short trip too.
Yes.
That's Rockingham, an hour away. So the wrestlers wrestle, they get back, to town. They can either go home or they go party.
Yeah. And we know what a lot of them chose. There's a high school in Bassett, Virginia that same day, much smaller gate, 1523, Don Kernodle and Nikita Koloff on top, Ron Starr and Buddy Landell underneath. Mike Fever is assigned. We haven't heard that name before a lot on the list here. Tell us about Mike.
I don't remember a lot about Mike in that he just showed up. He worked better as a referee than wrestler. He could go both ways, if needed be. But there again, you have talent and you have to get him, work. And that's what we did. He was not a main event guy, so he worked as a referee.
Let's move on here, and let's mention also too. I feel like we should, that show that we talked about with Bob Roop and Ron Garvin in Manchester, Connecticut. It may have been canceled because it's scratched through, but the next day they are working for Bob in Springfield, Massachusetts. And meanwhile, you guys on the 4th, you're back in Atlanta doing a TV taping. And we've also got Cincinnati, Ohio, Greensboro, North Carolina, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Boy, Saturday is a busy freaking day here, is it not?
Yes, it is. That we have. This is when we start flying people.
Right.
That we've got a G1. It's a twin engine turboprop, 16 passenger. So we could fly them up. In the case of Greensboro, they could drive back up, from Atlanta to Greensboro. Yeah, it's a full day. Think about it, because we're based in Charlotte. We have to get down to Atlanta for morning taping. That those that are going to Greensboro would drive down there. Those that were going to Cincinnati would take the plane down, and then those that of us that were going back and forth to Charlotte would fly, catch a 5 a.m. flight to Atlanta out of Charlotte. So yeah, busy day.
Busy day indeed. And you start the day with a big angle. You're actually going to have Ric Flair and Magnum TA do an interaction on your studio taping here in Atlanta, where Flair's going to make fun of Magnum's wardrobe, probably talking about wearing those funky blue jeans and driving a motorcycle. And of course, eventually Magnum feels like he's being challenged when Rick is face to face. He takes his vest off, slides in the ring, and Rick says something like, "I don't think you're ready to be embarrassed on national TV, but you're certainly planting the seeds here." Meanwhile, as we mentioned, you've got a big day that day. 3 shows: Cincinnati, Ohio, $6,900 there. Greensboro, North Carolina. Boy, this is a big one. $20,000 at the gate. Rocky Mount, North Carolina does $3,900, and you've got $2,300 by Springfield, Mass. Do you think that would have been you guys part of the gate up there in Springfield, Mass, or is that the total gate?
That's the total gate.
Okay.
See, Springfield, and it's just not working.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not working. I think that, again, like you said earlier, that we, instead of throwing money in a hole,
right,
we should have backed off from it. But
yeah, there's a phrase in business: you're throwing good money after bad.
Yes.
Like eventually you should just cut your losses. And Cincinnati is not one of those. We got Manny Fernandez and Thunderbolt Patterson over Arn and Ole, $6,900, as we said. The huge show in Greensboro at the Coliseum has 4,721 fans there to see a Texas bull rope match with Dusty and Tully. But the main event is a cage match between Magnum TA and Wahoo McDaniel. The Rocky Mount, North Carolina show, which was a little smaller, $3,900. It's Jimmy Valiant versus superstar Billy Graham. I have a feeling maybe that wasn't the best match that we saw that weekend.
Oh God, no. I mean, I think Dick Slater and Barbarian probably were better. Definitely. Yeah, that's a high school. Rocky Mountain was a high school. So, man. Yeah, see, again, you're doing so many things that there's not enough time and not enough when I say time, television time,
right.
to shoot and angles and then remind people about the angles and continue. Because then you're just putting, like Valiant and Superstar Billy Graham, you're just putting bodies against bodies. There's no rhyme or reason. You're just hoping the people can identify, oh, Jimmy Valiant's here. Let's go see him, the Boogie Woogie Man. Yeah. Superstar Billy Graham. Yeah. Sometimes this depresses me sometimes, but okay.
Well, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hey, look,
no, it does, but it's hindsight's 20/20, right? You just it's fun to think about it though. Some of these people, Buzz Sawyer, I'm looking down, Steubenville. Ah, man, he was something else.
I wanted to bring this Rocky Mount, North Carolina show up on the 4th. It says Brentsfield is assigned. That's not a name I'm familiar with. Is there any chance that Brentsfield is actually Kim Birchfield? Who is Brentsfield?
I have no idea.
Okay.
No, Brentsfield, that's over my head. I don't know who that'd be.
On May the 5th, Ron Bass and J.J. Dillon are booked out to Championship Wrestling from Florida. They're down in Orlando. Meanwhile, we got Steubenville, Ohio. There's about 400 fans in attendance paying $3,400. Earl Hebner is on the case. We got Manny Fernandez and Thunderbolt Patterson taking on Ole and Arn Anderson. That same day, we're in Columbus, Ohio. It's a 3 p.m. start, so it's a matinee show with Tommy Young assigned at the Municipal Coliseum in Columbus. We're going to get $6,000 at the gate. Sort of a 3-way dance to the top, maybe. We got the United States Heavyweight Championship with Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. Then we got Ron Garvin and Tully Blanchard. But what goes on last is Dick Slater and Dusty Rhodes taking on Billy Graham and the Barbarian. That same day, we're running another show at the Cobb County Civic Center in Marietta, Georgia. $6,000 here. This is an 8-piece start. So it's the same crew. Underneath, it's Magnum and Buddy Landell, Ron Garvin and Tully Blanchard. And once again in the main event, Dusty Rhodes with Dick Slater taking on Billy Graham and the Barbarian. This was normal back in the day for you to have a matinee show and an evening show. Where the guys these days, I think there might be some belly aching about, having to wrestle, travel, and wrestle again because everybody's on guaranteed money. But in this day,
there you go.
You get paid more when you wrestle more, so nobody's complaining, right?
That's right. Yeah, nobody's complaining because, we would do a Christmas, 3:00 in Greenville, South Carolina, 8:00 in Charlotte. There were a lot of, we'd do Savannah at 3, and then we'd get them back to either Greenville or Charlotte. That's a 5-hour trip, but they're making money. Again, unlike guaranteed contracts, they are making money because I remember, with Turner, at one point we had, when Turner took us over, we had $18 million worth of talent sitting on their butts because they said they were hurt. So
a lot,
and that doesn't help.
No.
Yeah, that was the biggest mistake that Turner made. That to say I'm going to guarantee you X, and you don't have to do anything for it. Come on, it's if people can get away with it, then why work? I'm hurt.
I hate to do a sidebar here, but this is the first time you and I have recorded since it's become apparent that WWE is going to be doing a merger. And I think a lot of people are categorizing this as a sale. It's not really a sale. I don't think there's any cash changing hands. It's just a stock swap, if you will. But the gist is UFC and WWE are merging to create a new company under the Endeavor banner, which means for the first time that I've ever heard the name or known the name, I guess Vince McMahon has a boss. Did you think we would ever see this day where Vince merged companies and he wasn't in total control?
I would have thought he would retire.
Yeah.
And just spend his money. But I guess his ego is such that, you know, he can't let go. You think that you know, he does not want to let go and walk away and let Triple H do what he can do. Or maybe this is the way for them to gradually let Vince go, let, you know, Endeavor get in there and feel their way around and put their certain people in place, and then, you know, see what they can do with it. But I think that for them to take over and just have Joe Blow be head of WWE would not work for him. You know, the fans would balk at that. They need a figurehead that they know right now, then gradually let him fade out into the sunset. Well, does that make sense for you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. You know, it's interesting that he gave himself a 2-year contract with an option for 1 year to renew. And I don't know, man, it's a whole new world, but wrestling is a changing. You know, what we're going to talk, I'm sure, eventually about, you know, when you guys sold the Turner and how it all changed, and maybe
big time.
Maybe the McMahons will be in for a similar set of circumstances.
All right, let's talk about it for a second. That with that change, will Endeavor take over marketing? I mean, WWE is golly, the amount of money they make, their marketing, T-shirts,
this
video games.
They had $20 million in sponsorship just for WrestleMania weekend.
All right, UFC have that?
Yeah, I think UFC actually has way more in sponsorship money, and I think that's one of the reasons that this deal probably makes sense. But you're exactly right. The UFC acquisition by Endeavor led to tens of millions of dollars of cost reductions, and already there's been discussion that there will be $70 to $100 million of cost savings by merging these two companies, which is fancy speak for a lot of folks are going to lose their job here.
Yes. Yeah, you've got that Vince's building there in Stanford.
Yeah.
All those production people. You've got his television truck. You know, it's leased, but still, you know, it's long-term lease. All the talent. You know, you think about it, you know, since he's son of the only game. Yeah, you've got AEW, but Tony Khan can't handle all that talent. You know, was one of his problems. You know, he inherited, you know, he took too much as far as talent. So, you know, they're going to cut talent. They're going to cut, I would think, what they pay.
Yes.
Slowly.
Yes.
You know, that, you know, you'll make it off of marketing. You know, if you get, you know, we will strive to make you $2 million. You know, a lot of that includes marketing, TV commercial if you're on that, or in movies and so forth. But yeah, to guarantee you sit home, no. Now, I wonder what their structure is for UFC fighters.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, and not for the good. And I don't think this will wind up being a net positive for unfortunately, for a lot of WWE folks. But I guess we'll see how it goes. We know how it went on May 6th. It was a Monday. You guys ran 2 shows, one in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Only $1,800 there at the gate. Greenville, South Carolina is in your backyard. You get $64 there. Magnum TA and Nikita on top. Meanwhile, the Greensburg, Pennsylvania show, well, we weren't exactly set in the woods on Manny Fernandez and Arn Anderson on top, Buzz Sawyer and Crusher Khrushchev. The Italian Stallion is going to be in for Ron Starr taking on Scott Irwin. He's also going to work against Kim Duke, and we got Hard Rock Ricky Reeves against Stone Burke. These are some names that I have to admit I've never heard of. We're just servicing the market more so than anything, right?
Yes, we are. You know, a lot of the talent is, I guess you might say, one-shot wonders. that they come in, they try to do their thing, it doesn't work, and they just go away. That you have to keep looking for new talent because you need it. Something, you can only stand Jimmy Valiant, the superstar Billy Graham, and nothing against Rocky King. You need a rest. You need a rest, from talent. And so you need to find new talent that clicks, that the TV likes them, that camera likes them, that they are good talkers. And so you give it a try. And if it doesn't work, then you go to the next one.
I wanted to ask about Rick Reeves. I understand that there was a Rick Reeves that once upon a time filed a lawsuit, a racial discrimination lawsuit against WCW, and Sonny Ono was involved in that years later.
Yes.
Is this the same Rick Reeves here?
I think so. Okay. I think so. Yes, that. I remember it was going on, and legal was handling that. It's, there again, that was not part of my job description, so to speak. I just always knew about it, but, because hell, I talked to Sonny all the time.
Right.
And, it was, and a lot of that, I hate to say it had to do with Jim Hurd, with, he didn't know when to keep his mouth shut. He was like an old military guy.
I see.
Yeah. So that was wrong on his part.
We got a lot of stuff happening here on Tuesday, May 7th. We're in Gainesville, Georgia. We got 2270 at the gate. Allentown, Pennsylvania is still struggling. Only $1,700 here, but TV in Spartanburg does 4,500. The advertised dark match is Magnum TA versus Ivan Koloff. But we run an A show and a B show here, 2 sets of tapings. This is a lot. You're doing 2 shows in a day, and 2 is a double header TV taping.
Well, the TV tapings, we would do 2. We just change the ring skirts and off we go.
Right.
But Spartanburg, South Carolina, maybe 800 people in a small building, no air conditioning. We had to use what we call lights on a stand that you send up 4 corners. That place would rock. I mean, it was deafening. The sound of you were maybe 60 feet from the ring, and the fans were 5 feet from you.
Right.
But, oh, it's so much fun. That, you couldn't help but get excited, as an announcer or anyone, even the wrestlers. It's they were right there, really. The fans, you had that 4-foot drop section, and now I think it's 8 to 10 feet, but, 4 feet, and the fan was right there. Oh, what fun.
May 8th, we're back on the road. We're in Dorton Arena. We got $4,052 there. Pat Tanaka is going to get us started. But when it's all said and done, we got 3 kind of big main events. The tag titles on the line with Ivan and Nikita taking on Dick Slater and Don Kernodle. The TV title on the line when Tully Blanchard defends against Magnum TA. And then a lights out 1 fall death match with Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. That's over at the famed Dorton Arena. Meanwhile, we're also running Ocean City, Maryland, and this is a lot bigger number. $4,500 here for Manny Fernandez and Arn Anderson on top. Originally, it was promoted as Manny Fernandez and Thunderbolt Patterson against Ole and Arn. When you have a change like that for your main event, do you announce that right at the top of the show and offer refunds and almost no one takes you up on it? Is that normal protocol?
Right. We offer right at the first, there was something happened with, the wrestler and and, if you want to go home, fine, go to the box office. And we would put I know for us in our area, the Charlotte area, we would put up before you even got into the building, that substitution and who it was. Yeah, in case you wanted to turn around, but most people didn't because they already paid for parking.
Right.
Ocean City, Ocean City, that was a sort of a civic center there in Ocean City. But parking wasn't that bad, and that's close to, believe it or not, Norfolk. So the travel was fine. Or they were in Raleigh the day before, so Ocean City, and that's not a bad drive. And that's what we're looking at. You think about it, it's either routing. You have to look at routing, with this, always in mind, because the wrestlers, at that time, would carpool, and you'd route them.
We got 4 shows happening, only 3 that you guys are promoting on Thursday, May the 9th. Down in Jacksonville, Florida, you've got Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard, and Baby Doll loaned out. Meanwhile, you're running Magnum TA and Buddy Landell on top in Norfolk, Virginia for over $6,000. We've got a show in New Jersey as well with Thunderbolt Patterson and Manny Fernandez taking on Ole and Arn Anderson. And then down in Athens, Georgia, it's Ron Garvin and Bob Roop for the national title. $2,200 there at the gate. Do you know when I assume that Dusty is making these matches and these cards, and is that the way this goes in this era?
Part of this time, it's Dusty and Ole down that way, because Ole was the booker.
He was handling some of the Georgia stuff, right?
Yes. So you have that, and then we're looking at how do we juggle this? Athens was a spot show. Athens is a college town, and Athens is really not, to me, a wrestling town at that time. Because where you going to have a building? The building's going to be within Athens, and people from, quote, outside of Athens proper aren't going to come into the college town, on a weekend. I think this is a weekend. Yeah. So, you got to think about that, which, that hurt. It's not that much of a card. It's just not. I hate to say it.
Let's talk about
bodies. Yeah. Pardon?
I'm just curious, like, as far as when you're putting these cards together and there's like really an A, B, and I hate to say it this way, a C town. You've got 3 separate towns and you're trying to make sure you've got stars that can draw on each one. But I understand that just real life relationships are a thing. And so you mentioned a moment ago, some of these guys, when you're thinking about routing, they're riding together. So we know so-and-so is friends with so-and-so and they like to route together. And at the same time, we also know, hey, it's not just about what they prefer for their travel and whatnot. It's also about who's going to have the best matches, who's going to tell the best stories, and how that lines up with TV. I'm just wondering, as these assignments are handed out, who is telling the guys, you're going here, here, and here, and how far advanced notice do they get to sort of make some of those arrangements of, all right, I'll just ride with this guy or that guy, and who was really a pain in your ass, for lack of a better word, about, I don't want to be on this one. I want to be on that one.
Buddy Landell.
All right.
Denny Brown couldn't say much because he's not that, far. Yeah. Tanaka doesn't say much. Weaver's definitely not going to say anything. He's sort of, on his slide back. Sam Houston wouldn't say anything. Rocky King wouldn't say it to us, but he'd say it to somebody else. It would always get back to us. It's like tell the world, tell a wrestler. And golly, talk about gossip. Come on, sitting in a car, you're driving 3 hours, they're chewing tobacco and just swapping lies back and forth. Yeah. Roop would complain. Garvin never really did. So yeah, as a matter of fact, Sam Houston, is that the time Sam Houston and Baby Doll, were they having an affair?
I think
That
they're
time
going
were
to
they
get
dating?
together. Yeah, they're getting together in this era.
Yeah, okay.
So they wanted to be booked together.
Yeah, Manny, yeah, he complained some. Ole always complained. Just hell about the weather. It didn't matter. Buzz Sawyer, yeah, a little bit. Italian Stallion, definitely. Thunderbolt, yes, yeah, he would. But yeah, it was, they would not complain necessarily to us, but they would complain enough that either Gene Anderson or Sandy Scott, J.J. Dillon was always listening. It would always get back to us. The referees were definitely, our ears in our dressing room. If we had Tommy Young, Hebner, Sonny Fargo, nothing's going to get around us.
Right.
It would always come back, always.
Well, the unhappiness doesn't just exist in the Crockett locker room. It makes the observer here in this era. This is a direct quote from Dave. Quote, Mr. T is also unhappy with McMahon. One report I got stated T will no longer work for Titan, but he does want to work in wrestling. And another report has it that his agent has been discussing things with Jim Crockett. I expect Crockett would turn him down, but I'm not as certain as I would have been 3 months ago of this. The reason I'm given for this is apparently money promised to T didn't materialize. Join the club. So this would have been on the heels of WrestleMania 1. We know ultimately Mr. T does work with WWE again. He's a part of WrestleMania 2 in a boxing match against Roddy Piper. Do you recall you or your brother ever having conversations about potentially using Mr. T?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
It was in passing that it made no sense as far as the money that he wanted.
Oh, so you do recall there being a conversation about cash?
Yeah, but it was like, forget it. There really wasn't a discussion per se. It just when we heard the dollar figure was, that's not going to happen.
Do you recall what it was?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I don't
just remember it was off-putting, and you knew it wouldn't work.
Yeah, because it was such a guarantee that he just sort of come in for the event and that's it. That didn't work.
That's not your model in this era. You're on a rev share model. This is years before guaranteed money anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. So Richmond, Virginia on May 10th, Charleston, South Carolina also on May 10th, and Albany, Georgia. I got to say, I wouldn't have guessed it would have gone like this. Albany, Georgia gets $10,800 at the gate. Richmond, Virginia is over $11,000, and Charleston is just $1,400. One of the things I wanted to ask about is I think one of the reasons we're seeing in May 3 shows as opposed to 2, it feels like we're including a lot of the Georgia territory. Why were those not in these quote unquote little red books until May of 85? It's weird that the Georgia towns are not always listed. Sometimes it would just say so-and-so is loaned out here or there, but now there's a full card listing. What changed, if anything, as best you can recall?
Because we started promoting it, that, it became our financial burden. I guess it would be that the talent in the towns that we sort of took over booking it all. And so we started putting it, into the cards, so into the book, so you can look at it and start figuring out, okay, where does this, talent need to go? And then 2, at the same time, we had promoters in Georgia, the Wards, Fred Ward, and his nephew, I think it is, or his son-in-law, and there were a couple other people that we had to work with to give them talent. And we even had an office, in Georgia. Janie Engel, was part of that group.
Man,
So,
I just kind of assumed she was a WCW era person. She's around even back then.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. She could tell you some stories.
We've had some conversations. We've just never actually pulled the trigger. I'm going to make that happen this year. Man, what a story she's got. These shows days though, May 10th, we got a 60-minute time limit and a world title match, or TV title match rather, with Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA. That's in Richmond, as is the lights out steel cage match with Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. Meanwhile, Charleston, South Carolina, maybe you wonder why that one's down. Well, here's the full card: Ricky Reeves and Joel Deaton, Rocky King and Doug Vines, Rocky Kernoodle and John Tatum, Sam Houston and Black Bart, Buzz Tyler and Ron Bass. That'll do it. Albany, Georgia has Dusty Rhodes and Ivan Koloff, Manny Fernandez and Arn Anderson, Buzz Sawyer and Nikita Koloff, Ron Garvin and Crusher Khrushchev, and more. Pretty loaded. It's easy to see why these gates are doing 10,000, 11,000, and 1,400.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until you look at the building, Charleston, South Carolina, the building there was in a bad part of town, and no air conditioning. I'd been down there several times. It's gloomy. It was built back during the Depression. With the Works campaign that they had to build. But not a good building. Yeah.
We're going to do TV on the 11th, and we're going to get started by picking up where we left off with Ric Flair and Magnum TA. Flair's going to say that Magnum hasn't paid his dues. Magnum's going to come out and say, let's not forget, I challenged you last week and you walked out. And Flair says, oh yeah, well, that's why my belt's gold and yours is silver. You're going to shot when I decide you deserve one. And the rest of the card is interesting, but what's most interesting is Tony Schiavone doing an interview with Flair where he says there's a misconception that pro wrestling is made up of clowns, and he's putting over Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, Dick Slater, Manny Fernandez, Carlos Colon, Bob Armstrong, Harley Race, and the Von Erichs. But I'm the best of the best because I've got the belt. So he's mentioning other territories and other parts of the world. Clearly, this is a shot at the more cartoony presentation that the WWF had. Is that a narrative, or is that a directive rather that he gets from you and your brother, or is that Dusty, or is that just him doing him?
That's him. Okay. That is Rick doing Rick.
Okay.
Come on, Rick.
Sure.
Are you going to control him? No. So no, that's just him. And he's also promoting himself.
And nobody is going to claim to be the world heavyweight champion until he goes through me.
I wanted to discuss this. You think about Rick, the world heavyweight champion, he's going out.
Right.
So we have, Magnum TA, and you have Tully Blanchard. Tully had the TV title, and then the U.S. title. Well, we came together and decided that the U.S. title was really going to be our world heavyweight championship title because Rick was going to be gone so much. And you had, this, plethora of great talent with us. So why not do something? Because we know he's going to be gone all the time. So, we had to work with that. And what a pleasure it was to work with it. Great matches.
I do want to ask about these TV matches. Like, how do you guys decide what enhancement talent is going to be used or not on TV? Like, or even not just enhancement talent, but like Scott Irwin was a television star or a top guy for Georgia. I mean, he's an established player, but he's not really used on TV. Was it a political thing to decide who got on TV and who didn't? And how was all that decided?
Not so much political as it was you only had so much time.
Right.
In which you could promote it. So you had to make a choice of, who you're going to put on there. And we chose our top talent. more so than anybody else, the enhancement talent, they came to us from different areas around Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, to get a paycheck. And some of the guys that we used in the lower card, they'd come down and be the job guy.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Oh, it does totally.
Yeah.
I want to ask about this TV taping in particular. Abdullah the Butcher's on this one. We didn't see him on TV a lot, but boy, he was a big time established star, certainly a drawing card anywhere in the world, not to mention Japan, where he was, godlike over there too. Just, he is an attraction. Maybe he's not going to be in your title match, but Lord, people want to see him and they're really scared of him. I mean, what a look, what an impressive presentation. How was he as a businessman? Somebody that you were going to feature and put on TV and promote. We don't hear a lot about the real life Abdul the Butcher.
Spanky. That was my nickname for him, Spanky. And I'd say, Spanky, what are you doing? He'd come in. I loved it. He was great to work with. Because he lived in Atlanta. So matter of fact, his restaurant was Chinese and barbecue.
Yeah.
Crazy. But yeah, he would excellent, not long matches.
Right.
He's an attraction. He's going to bleed like a stuck pig. Scary? Yes. Definitely scary. Golly, he was so much fun. And that I remember one time on TBS, he brought out raw liver, just this big thing. And he hold it up and I start eating it, this blood just going everywhere. Well, needs to say, we got a call next day, had to go see Jerry Hogan, about, can't do that.
Right.
Eating the raw meat. But it also helped Abdullah because, he went everywhere. You mentioned, Japan, but, he went over to Puerto Rico, big in Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, he was not a person that you'd have him come in for a month or anything like that. He would come in for certain events, definitely come in for TV. Then he'd go somewhere, then come back for house shows, big house shows. I wouldn't send him to Albany, Georgia, or anything like that. He'd scare the people to death.
Let's talk about something that Meltzer was scared to death about. He would write this in his June 1st, 1985 Observer. The only televised wrestling I've watched since the last report were Vince's NBC show on May 11th, which would have been Saturday night's main event, and Crockett's 511 show on WTBS. Although Vince's show was very disappointing and honestly trash, compared to Crockett's show, it was a masterpiece. I don't think I've ever been so thoroughly turned off to wrestling as I was watching that Crockett show. I may watch the WWF once every 6 weeks or so if it rains on a weekend or something, but I'll watch religious programming before watching Crockett on WWF. In one breath, to have Flair say, quote unquote, "We're not clowns," trying to refer to Vince's boys as clowns, which they are, and then bring out Dusty and a guy in a gorilla suit a few minutes later is too much to take. So I know you didn't give a rip what Dave wrote, but tell me what you thought of the gorilla suit. This is something that wrestling fans have had a lot of fun with over the years. Dusty and a guy in a gorilla suit.
Well, you just said it. Wrestling fans had a lot of fun with it.
Yes.
It's something that you remember. It caught your attention. It caught Meltzer's attention.
Yes.
Even though he didn't like it, he remembered it.
Yeah,
so
did.
Sometimes you do those things to shock value, right? And they go, what? What is this? And then you start watching, and it's our job to get you hooked on it. What's the gorilla going to do? Next time or this time and so forth. Yeah. It was funny.
It was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it was. It was funny.
Goes the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, with the mother of his gorilla, and he really did it.
Yeah. That Lethal Weapon, good movie, right?
Yeah.
You had the action, they were shooting people, but they were funny too.
Yeah, you had some comedy in there.
Are you calling me crazy? You think I'm crazy? Yeah, you want to see crazy? I'll tell you.
So why not? Why not do it? It doesn't have to be so serious. You're going to have somebody be hit over the head with a stick with nails in it and barbed wire every week. No.
Right.
Add a little humor, and shock value of what in the hell is this? What about Ron Garvin dressed in drag?
Yes.
We
did some fun stuff for sure.
Yeah. So, it was fun stuff. You do it every now and then. You don't do it all the time. But it helped. People talked. Good or bad, they talked about it.
Let's talk about what we're doing on the 11th. Not just TV, but 3 shows. A big show at the Coliseum in Charlotte. $23,000 at the gate, and man, it's loaded up top to bottom. Barbarian and Sam Houston, Buddy Landell and Johnny Weaver, Dusty Rhodes and Scott Irwin. The national tag team titles with Arn and Ole against Buzz and Pez. The TV title with Tully and Manny. The world tag team titles, Magnum and Slater against the Russians, and a lights out New York street fight, Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. Much smaller gate over in Conway, South Carolina. It's Buzz and Bass on top. They do $2,400, and a third show that day down in Georgia. Ron Garvin and Crusher Khrushchev on top, $4,200 at the gate. And that weekend, you're all over, and you're getting tons of coverage in the Charlotte Observer. What was your relationship like with the Charlotte Observer in this era?
Excellent. Really was. Because at that time, we also had a baseball team, the Charlotte O's, and it was very good. Our relationship with the Observer, the sports writers, and also just the entertainment writers. They're starting to realize that television-wise, rating-wise, event-wise, wrestling actually has an audience.
Right.
It's actually sociably acceptable to talk about wrestling and watch it. So, some of the writers actually came to the matches and enjoyed them. It's theater to them. But yeah, they and then too, you look at they also recognize Vince, WWF, being on, I think, USA at the time, right? So they recognize us through him. And they say, let's look at this.
Right.
So Vince did us some good too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all bad. That's for sure.
No.
On the 12th, we finally get a payoff for this gorilla business that happened the day before. It's a big show in the Omni, does $38,000 at the gate. Top to bottom, pretty decent little card here. Barbarian and Sam Houston, Superstar and the Italian Stallion, Buzz Sawyer and Crusher Khrushchev, Magnum TA and John Tatum, Tully Blanchard, Ron Garvin for the TV title, a no DQ with Thunderbolt Patterson and Manny Fernandez beating Ole and Arn Anderson, Jimmy Valiant and Abdul the Butcher. And then in the main event, Dusty Rhodes and a guy in a gorilla suit. They call Ivan and Nikita. Of course, the guy in the gorilla suit winds up being Dick Slater. Listen, it was silly. It was fun, but it drew $38,000. So I won't listen to too much criticism about it. That same day, there's a show in Sumter, South Carolina, much smaller show, a 3 p.m. start. On top is Bass and Tyler. The Omni, though, is this something? I mean, we've always heard of the Omni, and Arn Anderson on his podcast has even said that was like Madison Square Garden of the South. And I know that, the Greensboro opportunity was maybe the one that was most important for JCP. What'd you think of the Omni?
Well, once we took over Georgia,
right?
To me, we had twins, the Omni and Greensboro.
Okay.
Charlotte was third, but it was the Omni and Greensboro. That Omni for us became, we had a larger, let's say, audience, within the metro area than Greensboro or Charlotte. Atlanta's a huge city.
Yeah, it is.
So, that definitely helped. The people at the Omni were excellent to work with. So, it was, they were twins. I wouldn't, say one was better than the other. They were twins. Both buildings were fantastic. The management, the crews, both buildings were excellent. I couldn't pull them apart, really. Didn't want to.
Let's talk about May 13th. We got 3 shows here. Canton, Ohio, almost $3,800 with Ron Garvin and Bob Roop on top. Greenville, South Carolina, $4,900 with Jimmy Valiant and Superstar on top. Also, Cumberland County Memorial Arena in Fayetteville, North Carolina, $8,300 on top. Of course, it's Nikita and Magnum. And then right after that, for the TV title, Tully Blanchard and Dusty Rhodes. I want to ask about just positioning of the card here, because we see the Mid-Atlantic title, third from the top, then the U.S. title, which is Magnum and Nikita, and then Tully and Dusty for the TV title on top in the main event. And I think most fans view the U.S. title to be more prestigious than the television title. But at the same time, Dusty Rhodes is a bigger star than anybody on this card. The star power dictates what goes on last, not necessarily the titles involved, right?
Conrad, who's booking?
Dusty Rhodes.
All right. I rest my case.
Do you think the U.S. title, if you were booking, would you have put Dusty on second to last because of the title or no?
I would probably put Dusty, second to last. But there again, with Tully, I'd much rather have Tully and Magnum wrestling each other. But that did,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would probably put Magnum and Nikita on last. I definitely would.
Wow.
I just think match-wise, length-wise, it would go longer than Tully and Dusty. I love Dusty, but his staying power in the ring would not be as long as Magnum and Nikita as far as stamina. But I guess Tully can carry you. Yeah. But I'd still rather see Magnum and Nikita.
Right.
Now, what about you?
Well, listen, I think Dusty's the biggest star, so I could see putting Dusty in the main event for sure because he is the more established star. And I don't know if I'm going to give guys a bunch of time. I don't know that I would necessarily want it to be a Nikita Koloff match. I would think I would want Tully to have more time. And since he's the heel, maybe Dusty's just got to sell. I don't know. I just find it interesting because I thought you might say what you said about, well, look who was booking. But I just wondered from your perspective, yes, the U.S. title may be more prestigious, but your name recognition, the guy whose name's on the poster is going to say it's probably Dusty, right?
Well, I'm looking at where this event is being held.
Okay.
Yeah. Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. You're talking about military town.
Okay. Now, all right.
Now, Nikita, USA, yeah. And it's also on the 13th. So it's payday, maybe, for the military.
Getting close to payday for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they can see, spending some money. and coming.
On the 14th, we got Saginaw, Michigan for $6,500 with Thunderbolt and Arn Anderson on top, but a big TV taping, 2 sets of shows. The advertised dark match is Valiant and Magnum against Graham and Barbarian, but then 2 sets of tapings here. Was TV tape was a TV taping day more stressful, or not so much?
Yes. Well, yes, because at TBS, the lighting was already there, the studio, the cameras. Whereas, when we're doing our show, we bring in the lighting.
The syndicated stuff.
Yeah, the syndicated stuff that, either it's a generator or you're hooking to the power to the building. Like in Shelby, we bring our own lighting, sound system. And you're there first thing in the morning, and it's a long day. And then you're doing the shows that night. And 2, we, at that time, we didn't have catering service, because it's just us. Wrestlers weren't there early. We weren't doing interviews per se with the wrestlers. We were just trying to set up and then the building, put the seats around the ring. And, I had Doug Dillinger was running a handheld camera. Now think about it. I had, Jackie was a handheld. None of these, we had, our crew from Columbia, working, who were television people. But then I had Larry McGraw, who was also a policeman. He ran the hard camera, which was, so. Yeah, it was definitely a stressful day, especially in Shelby. The TV truck blew out a transformer, so we had to do direct power. And Emerson said, well, either it's going to blow the truck or it's going to work. And it didn't blow the truck, so it worked that night. That was scary.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, just some of those things you think about now. That it was definitely stressful. It's and not we knew some of the stuff that was going to go on then, and it was not as elaborate as after Turner bought us.
Right.
Then you got into, golly, like I had to have 13 tractor trailers on the road just to handle the stuff. Yeah, crazy.
May 15th, we're in Troy, Ohio. We've got $2,300 at the gate here. It's a Thunderbolt and Pez against Arn and Bob Roop on top. Dorton Arena has $6,400 on the same day. And it's a big one. Third from the top is Ivan and Nikita over Magnum and Dick Slater. And then Dusty and Tully are going to do a TV title match. But the main event, lights out, New York street fight. Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. This is an interesting time because you don't see Dusty on all these cards, but you can certainly see the ones that are within driving distance. Dusty's on. On the 16th, we've got 2 shows here. Charleston, West Virginia. It's a Thunderbolt Patterson and Manny Fernandez against the Andersons. That same day, we're doing a special with tickets priced at $8 and $10. It's $10,200 at the Township Auditorium in Columbia, South Carolina. Dusty's working with Nikita here. Tully's working with Magnum TA. And once again, Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham, a lights out New York street fight. Listen, we sort of poked fun at that a little earlier, but you guys did it over and over and over. Was the stipulation selling it, in your opinion, or was it the star power?
Well, the star power on the full card was selling it. You look, you have Dusty on there, you have Nikita Koloff, you have Tully, Magnum, and then you have Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham and lights out. So they're going to see, they're going to see a lot of action, and with Valiant and superstar, they're going to see a lot of blood. With that last match. So, and that last match did not go that long. Never does. And it's the star power of the card that drew that's why we bumped the prices up.
We got 2 shows on the 17th, one in Wheeling, West Virginia, $6,400 with Manny and Thunderbolt against the Andersons, $8,800 over in Hampton, Virginia. Once again, it's Ivan and Nikita against Dick Slater and Buzz Tyler, but on top, that no DQ Jimmy Valiant Superstar Billy Graham show. And then it's time for more TV. And this happens, of course, back in Atlanta. Tony Schiavone is going to open the show talking to Magnum TA. Ric Flair is going to interrupt and say, hey, you can see me later. And Magnum says the contract's been signed. And Flair's going to have to prove himself against Magnum in the ring. Eventually, we know that Ric Flair goes out there and wrestles Sam Houston, gets the win with the figure 4. This, I know in hindsight, doesn't sound like a big deal, but I just want to remind everybody, Ric Flair was on this show all the time, but usually not wrestling. It's one of those deals where he's going to come out suited and booted and do some promotion for buying tickets here and there and yawn, but he didn't wrestle all the time. So it's a big deal when he's going to have the opportunity to wrestle. Eventually, he wins the match and goes to put the figure 4 back on. That's a real heelish thing. So here comes Magnum TA. He had been doing guest commentary for the match, and eventually he pulls him out, and everybody is excited to see Magnum TA versus Ric Flair. We know that the car wreck happens in October of 86, and there's been lots of discussion that maybe that was the direction for Starrcade 86, and that was when it was going to finally happen. Did you know here in 85, he could be our babyface Hulk Hogan. He could be our baby.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yes. I mean, that's where everything was going.
Right.
I mean, he was a natural. I mean, even today, I mean, Magnum, his look, his personality, just his demeanor. You want to like him. You do. You want to like the man. And it's, God works in mysterious ways. No telling where we, all of us would be if he hadn't had that car wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah. That car wreck put a dagger in us. It physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
He was liked. He was loved.
Yeah.
By the fans, by all of us. And, for that to happen. And Magnum, what if, you think about that. It's a shame. But Flair, Flair's best trait really is his interview.
Oh, for
that's
sure.
That's why we didn't want him to wrestle. He could spend 3 minutes, even 4 minutes talking, and it would mean more than him in the ring for 15 minutes wrestling someone. It's his stick, and the 4 horsemen that, it just, you let him go. He's not scripted. None of them are scripted.
Right.
That was the amazing thing. And, I look at all the interviews and all the matches that are scripted. With us, it was fly by the seat of your pants. And what a wonderful time and show we had. I mean, golly.
I want to just point out the obvious here, but maybe everybody hasn't understood where we are so far. We've mentioned Ric Flair several times on this program. Not once have I mentioned that he wrestled a match for you until TV here. Throughout the rest of the month, at this point, he's been working everywhere else. On May 3rd, he's working for Mid-South. On May 4th, he's working for Mid-South. On May 5th, May 6th, he's working for World Class. And he's working down in Florida for Championship Wrestling from Florida. He's doing business with them on the 7th and on the 8th and on the 10th. I mean, the only time you have him is when he's working your TV. I mean, even the very next day, or the very same day he's doing this interview here, the 11th, he's working in Florida. When you fast forward along the way, like Central State's on the 12th, Continental on the 13th, Continental on the 14th, Florida also on the 14th, a double shot, Florida again on the 15th. It's amazing when you really think about what we're doing here. At this point, the first time he has stepped in a ring for Jim Crockett Promotions is May 18th, and it's a squash match against Sam Houston. But that's it. And so I can't help but wonder, in hindsight, you talked about at the top of this program, we were giving too much. You're not taking, are you getting a booking fee at all when you have Flair working for other folks? Or when did you guys have a conversation about, we need to start being a little more selfish? This guy can draw money for us.
He's the world heavyweight champion.
Right.
That was the deal that was made
years ago.
Get him. Yeah, years ago. For him to become the world heavyweight champion, the NWA world heavyweight champion, he had to wrestle for members of the NWA.
Right.
You know, and so he was out. You know, they wanted him to pump their cards up so Vince wouldn't take them over. You know, and you know, had to let him go. You know, and at least we got him back for the interviews. And the interviews kept us going. You know, no, we didn't have him on the cards, but there again, we had to make do, which in some cases probably helped. You know, it made Tully a better wrestler. You know, you think about, you know, that, you know, Arn coming in, we were trying to make other people our, you know, it gave Magnum something, you know, to shoot for. We were looking, you know, I'm just looking over here, you know, the Hot Heels, you know, Slater was, you know, good, but he wasn't, you know, he wasn't that much of a heel. Buddy Landell, there again, you know, he had that potential. We were hoping for it, but there it just didn't, you know, he didn't click. He could have been, you know, Ric Flair for us. And, you know, Ric Flair, you're just a copy of me. But that didn't happen. Yeah, unfortunately. You know, Tully really, you know, he was from a wrestling family. He understood, you know, the business. So he really kicked in high gear. He really did. And still, too, I'm looking, you know, out, you know, we had Paul Jones still wrestling for us. You know, a lot of these were, you know, we had Ivan, even though he's not as old, you know, we had senior wrestlers, let's call it. How about that? The Paul Jones, the Johnny Weavers, the Ivan Koloffs, superstar Billy Graham. He was an attraction, more like Abdullah than really a wrestler. You know, Big Mama, you know, Valiant's, you know, wife was around. So we needed a younger group in here with piss and vinegar. And that's what we were looking. We thought, well, maybe Denny Brown, not. You know, Ron Bass really thought that he would kick in. You know, Pat Tanaka. It just, some of it you thought would work on paper, but it didn't.
Well, Cleveland, Ohio is where you're running on the 18th, and Greensboro, North Carolina. Big show in Greensboro. Does $18,527. It's that lights out on top. On the 19th, what a show. What a day. 19 of May does 4 shows, and you've got some folks loaned out. So you got some folks in Marietta, Georgia, drawing 5,200. An afternoon show in Asheville, North Carolina, drawing 5,600. Savannah, Georgia, with a 7:30 p.m. start, does 5,200. And we run a night show in Roanoke as well, 5,300 there. Over $20,000 and 4 shows and talent loaned out. Man, you guys are that's busy. 4 shows.
It's busy. It's too busy.
Yes.
Conrad, it's too busy. That if you had concentrated that talent, let's say 2 shows, but there again, that's too much talent for everybody to make a decent payoff. There again, looking, we needed to let some people go.
Yeah, you're growing too fast.
Yeah.
Like we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we are growing way too fast, taking on too much. I guess your eyes got bigger than your stomach, so to speak. You thought you could handle it all, but it's going to come back to bite us.
It's a blessing to have a Monday night. It's a Super Summer Sizzler Kickoff 85 in Greenville, South Carolina. Tickets are $8 and $10. Blanchard and Dusty Rhodes on top. Magnum and Abdullah right underneath. $15,000 on a Monday. The Super Summer Sizzler Kickoff 85. Is that a Dusty name, you think?
Pardon, what about Dusty? It was, it's a Dusty. It's a Dusty event. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's for Dusty. Again, you're looking at the total card,
right?
That made it such a special event. Abdullah against Magnum TA. That was an interesting match, to say the least. But you had Tully and Dusty. That was an excellent match. There again, that went some time, double disqualification. Yeah, definitely a good match.
Let's talk about the 21st of May here. You see the notes in the column: TV from Atlanta, Ole Anderson, Buzz Sawyer, Thunderbolt. So you're loaning some talent out for Georgia. And then in the right-hand side, you see Puerto Rico, Abdullah. So he's headed to work Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, you guys are syndicated A and B show. The dark matches are what gets the fans in the stands. That's Magnum, Ivan Koloff, and then that street fight that we've taken everywhere with Boogie and Superstar. But an A and a B show here. Man, the beat goes on because on Wednesday you only have 1 show, but it's a decent house. Maybe it has a lot to do with it being called the Super Summer Sizzler Kickoff again. Raleigh, North Carolina draws 6,900. Dusty Rhodes was advertised, but he's out. Buzz Sawyer's in. When Dusty missed a show, I mean, he's probably your biggest touring star at this point since Flair's working for everybody else.
Yes.
Is that maybe the only time people would get a refund at that announcement at the start of the show?
Of course they get. If they ask for it, they'll get it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but again, you're hoping that they don't.
Right.
And in most cases they don't. I guess you might say maybe 10 people
right
would ask for a refund. Other than that, no. You'd hear boos, but it's you do the best you can.
On TV, the syndicated show that we taped just right before this show, we would see your brother appear on TV where he would say that the NWA president, Bob Geigel, had fined Dusty Rhodes $1,500 for his actions. And then he's going to announce that Magnum had indeed earned a title shot against Ric Flair.
Magnum TA has finally got something he's worked very hard for and deserves, and that is a title match with Ric Flair, Nature Boy Ric Flair.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Was your brother comfortable on camera? Was that something that he enjoyed doing, or was it something he just felt was necessary? You mentioned earlier at the start, you did see him a lot in the background, but he is going to eventually become a figurehead. And as you guys start to do more of your own stuff and less of the NWA stuff, was that sort of a necessary step to establish him as, I don't know, the authority figure, if you will?
I think he started to do it too much. He got, as I call it, snake bit.
Right.
That he enjoyed. At first he was totally uncomfortable, with it. But then again, it's okay. That's me. People recognize me. People recognize him now when he goes on an airplane or in a restaurant or somewhere. hey, Jim Crockett, so that got to him, in my belief, and he enjoyed it. But I think that he should have been on TV less.
Right.
That, it was too much, that, we need to spend that time elsewhere with, thinking about what else is going on, because then too, they can also blame him for things that go wrong. So do you really want to be out there all the time?
Right.
I mean, to me, I'd rather have been in the truck,
right.
Directing.
Right. Let's talk about this other piece of business on this syndicated show. We would see Ole Anderson cut a promo and talk about how they've ran off everybody and nobody wants a part of them, and Thunderbolt's next. But he even name drops Andre the Giant and Bill Watts and Bruno Sammartino as people that the Andersons have defeated.
Wherever we happen to be, I'm sure somebody in the crowd will remember. Somebody watching TV is going to remember, oh, yeah, that's right. The Andersons did beat Andre the Giant. Oh, yeah, out in Oklahoma, they did beat Bill Watts. Oh, that's right, up in Pittsburgh in that area. I think Bruno Sammartino even retired because the Anderson brothers were coming that way.
I like that he's naming other folks, including Andre, by the way. One of the other things that happens here, though, is we see a vignette that you guys filmed. And I want to ask about this because this has been misused for decades at this point. There's a skit with J.J. Dillon and Buddy Landell sitting in a living room watching Ric Flair in action. And J.J. is feeding Buddy information about all of Flair's weaknesses. And we see Landell yawning in response. And he says that J.J.'s a genius, but man, I'm bored with Ric Flair. And then they play Smooth Operator, and we see Landell surrounded by women. He gets in a car with two women. He's going to a bar and dancing with these women. And you see these clips in Ric Flair packages from WWE all the time, because you never see Buddy's face for a lot of these female interactions. You just see the long blonde hair, and whoever's cutting it for WWE all these years just thought that was Ric Flair. It's actually Buddy Landell. Did you help film these vignettes? Who would have put those together?
Yes. Yeah, we did it. Yes, we definitely did. Yeah. Wayne Daniel, we went out and did it and lit it. And,
whose living room? Whose idea was that? It's well done.
Let me see. I think it was Jimmy's.
Okay.
Jimmy's living room. And Jimmy was there.
Of course.
For that. Yeah. You wouldn't let Buddy just do it himself. No. And in some cases, I can't remember, Dusty was there or not. In some of the ones, for different talent, he would be there. Just making sure. Yeah.
Well, we keep this Super Summer Sizzler tour continuing on the 23rd. Norfolk, Virginia does $10,400 with it. Is that Orangeburg, South Carolina? Is that right? I've never even heard of it.
Yes, sir. Orangeburg, that is halfway between Columbia and Charleston. That is I guess you would say a spot show. It's not a regular building. I think it was at the South Carolina State, I think is the university that's down there. So, yes.
Only $1,100 there, and then a third show down in Georgia. Macon, Georgia has Ron Garvin and Black Bart on top. But this, again, is 2 days in a row where Dusty was advertised and then doesn't actually appear, both on the 22nd and on the 23rd. But come the 24th, we're running another Super Summer Sizzler kickoff. This one, Dusty is on. It's going to be Dusty and Boogie taking on Superstar and Barbarian. That does $11,942. There's a second show that day down in Albany, Georgia for $4,400. On the 25th, we're in Florence, South Carolina. Blanchard and Rhodes on top does $14,200. Two other shows that day. Wilson, North Carolina does nearly $4,000 with Superstar on top, and $5,400 down in Columbus, Georgia. This time with a grudge match between Slater and Ivan Koloff. Of course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's really your bread and butter most of the time, is it not?
Yes. Yes, it is. Well, I back up. Mondays in Greenville, South Carolina.
Pretty strong.
Yeah, pretty strong. Then Sundays, Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be then Norfolk was a Thursday night town. So Norfolk was definitely pretty good on Thursdays. But Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And in a lot of cases, with our larger cities, it was hard to rent bigger buildings going into the Scope or the Richmond Coliseum or the Charlotte Coliseum. And so that's why you end up running some of the spot shows, because in high school gyms, you can't do anything during the week. So it's on the weekend that they're available. They normally don't, they might have a Friday night basketball team, in the gym, but then, Saturdays it's available. And then, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be our biggest days in most cases. Yes.
You're doing 3 shows on this Saturday we just mentioned, but you're also doing TV in the morning. You got Ric Flair out here cutting a promo, running down Dusty Rhodes and everybody else, and he's plugging appearances in Huntington, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Greensboro, and South Carolina. The Andersons are still name dropping. Hey, we ran out Wahoo McDaniel and Bill Watts and Bruno and Andre, and you're next. But there's a couple of interactions here that are worth noting. Tully gets a win over enhancement talent named Stony Burke, but after the match, Tully and Baby Doll confront Dusty Rhodes, who's doing guest commentary. And once they walk away, Dusty says something like he would slap Baby Doll because she's not a lady. That gets a big reaction from the crowd. Of course, you couldn't do that these days. And then Magnum TA gets a win over Paul Garner, but afterwards, he's going to confront Ric Flair. And Flair's going to tell Magnum he's got a lot going for him, but he needs to dress the part if he wants to be a real man.
Long before you think about taking this from me and representing the world as the world champion, first of all, if you're going to try and pass off as me, you got to be dressed right.
And then Magnum grabs Flair by the tie, and Flair then starts undressing, you think, because he's going to take on Magnum in the ring, but then he backs off. Eventually, he gets in the ring, jumps Magnum, rubs his face in the mat, and then retreats. So we're clearly setting up Flair and Magnum here to do some big business. And then, as we said, as if that's not enough, you're doing 3 shows that day. So that's the way you start your morning. 3 shows on Saturday, 3 shows on Sunday. You've got Marietta, Georgia, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina. Greensboro does $17,500. Fayetteville, North Carolina does $14,660. And Marietta, Georgia, man, it feels like as the month goes on, the houses get bigger and bigger and bigger. Momentum is real.
It is, but you got to remember, we're charging, premium prices there again at that time, $10 and $8.
Right.
Think about today what they're charging for tickets.
Yeah.
So it's catching on. Everything's starting to move. Everybody's feeling good. The jealousy's not there. Everybody's making money. So, let's go with it. Magnum and Ric Flair, it's a tease, constant tease. A lot of thought went into Magnum and Rick.
It happens here. That Greensboro Coliseum show at the $17,500 gate. On top, of course, it's Dusty and Jimmy against Superstar and the Barbarian. That's a lights out steel cage match. But right before that is the world title match where Ric Flair and Magnum TA go to a 60-minute time limit draw. This is only the second time you get him wrestling on a card for you. The first time was the same day. It was an afternoon shot in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where it would be Jimmy Valiant teaming with Ric Flair against Billy Graham and the Barbarian. So you get 2 shots out of Rick here. But him and, think about that too. Flair wrestles in the afternoon and then does a 60-minute show at night. Wow. But it's against Magnum. Do you remember the first time you saw them in the ring together? Did you think, man, this is our next box office? This is it?
Oh, yes. Rick is a great ring general.
Yes.
And Magnum, Rick would, you've got, who's going to lead the match?
Right.
Fans, let's explain. In most cases, the heel will lead the match. He will dictate the pace. He will let the babyface do their thing in certain ways. He will know what moves the babyface has, and he will also, if it's a 60-minute time limit, he can work it to where you're up, down, rest holds, and so forth. And Rick was a master at being a ring general, and Magnum was a fantastic wrestler. He learned a lot from Rick and other people that he wrestled. You know, when he came in, we put him with top talent, and so that's the way to learn from top talent. And he was like a sponge. Magnum was like a sponge where he just soaked it all in, and you saw the results of that in that 60-minute match. The fans were not bored. I guarantee you, the fans were on their feet 90% of the time, up and down. That's the way they kept them, up and down, up and down. Beautiful match.
I can't wait to talk a little more about it. But what I'm really excited about asking, and I've waited the entire program to ask about this one, Monday, May 27th, you guys run Three Rivers Stadium. What a huge stadium this is. And what else would you put on top but Ric Flair and Magnum TA for the world title? Right underneath that, Tully Blanchard and Dusty Rhodes. Then we've got the Russians taking on Dick Slater and the Raging Bull. We've got that street fight we've perfected at this point with Boogie and Superstar. The national tag team titles with Arn and Ole against Thunderbolt and Pez. You've got other matches, but this is a pay-per-view level card based on the angles and the stories you've been telling on TV, and you run it in a stadium. It draws $15,740, but the reality is the show probably could have been ran in an arena. It didn't have to be in Three River Stadium, but this is the era where both you and the WWF are taking turns running it. Why book here on a Monday as opposed to an arena, an indoor arena?
The arena would not let us in.
Okay, well, there you go.
Pure and simple. They would not let us in. You know, they were loyal to Vince.
Right.
You know, and that's the only reason. You know, when you run it at a stadium, you've got weather to contend with. Your overall operation nut that you're going to have to pay is doubled.
Right.
So no, it's not a good thing to run just a show. Yeah, this was, a special, but to run Three Rivers, it would be almost like a WrestleMania.
Right.
Something like that. It was not that special to run it in Three Rivers Stadium. It just wasn't.
Let me ask you this. When we talk about stadium shows, of course, the entire wrestling world is talking about the fact that AEW is going to run a stadium show, but not domestically. They're going to run it over in the UK. They're going to run it in Wembley Stadium. It's the first time that building has had a big wrestling show since SummerSlam 1992. So it's almost a similar anniversary. They're calling it All In 2, which I guess was the precursor for AEW and a very special show to a lot of people, myself included.
Right.
When you heard the news that AEW is running a stadium, you're very familiar with wrestling promotions running stadiums. They're running one abroad. You were even there at the height of the WCW days with the Georgia Dome and all the Monday domes that they did. What is what's your impression? What's your expectation? What is your hope for AEW in Wembley?
I hope they do well. I really do. But man, running outside, that's not the why go outside? Why not go to a bigger building there? And I know they don't have one that's as big as a stadium, but is he going to sell out the stadium? How many seats are in that stadium?
90,000.
Man,
It's incredible, is it not?
Yeah, 90,000. I would be concerned because the look as far as the camera,
Right.
if you don't fill that place up, even if you just shoot one side, the camera's going to pick up empty seats unless you black everything else out. It's God help them.
Right.
I'm glad Tony's got the money. Yeah, Shivani too.
Well, as we've heard, by the time folks watch this, perhaps tickets are already on sale. But as you and I are recording, they've had over 50,000 reservations. So you assume that those 50,000 folks, they're not all buying one ticket. Maybe they're hoping to buy two or more. There's a chance that this thing, maybe it doesn't sell out. I don't know how much they're going to need to chop off for staging and all that, but I really do think they'll hit 60,000 folks, which would be a high watermark for AEW.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah. You could make a good show out of that.
Yes.
I mean, you're going to have to kill seats, position the ring and so forth for the stage and entrance and all that. Yeah, but that would be good. I'd take that. And yeah. 50, 60, yes, definitely.
I mean, I think 40 is a high five all around, but I'm with you. The more people, the merrier. I can't wait to see it. It's going down at the end of August. And of course, you mentioned earlier that Monday was always big for you guys in Greenville. It's pretty big here still, even though you're running a stadium show. You draw 4,400 in Greenville. You don't want to not be there for those fans. You're always there.
Right.
And then you're going to run a bunch of shows on a Tuesday. Check this out. 2 shows and a TV taping, a total of 3 events here. Can't believe this is even real. Wait, no, hang on. Is this 4? My goodness. Let's just jump into it. We've got Lansing, Michigan, national tag team titles on top, just $7,400. Altoona, Pennsylvania, maybe not our best area, but we're doing it with Boogie and Superstar, $2,000 there. Then we're doing a TV taping in, am I saying this right? Lincolnton, North Carolina?
That is correct. Yeah.
Magnum TA and Ivan Koloff is your dark match, and then we get busy. $8,300 here. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Michigan. That seems like a new market for you guys in this era, Michigan.
It is, and it's actually, to me, too far away.
Yeah.
You're spread. Yeah. The travel cost does not compute.
Right.
It just doesn't. We were just going too far out, expanding too much. It just, all we're doing really is cash flow. I'm looking at the towns and the gate that in most cases it's costing us money.
Right.
So yeah, definitely. It definitely doesn't work.
Flair's back with you here on Wednesday, the 29th. You got 2 shows, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Of course, Flair's not there. That's going to be a grudge match with Thunderbolt and Raging Bull against the Andersons. But Raleigh, North Carolina, boy, that is going to be a Flair show. And what a show it is. You got Rocky King and Landell. You got Kernoodle and Bass. You got the Russians against Magnum and Dick. And then in the main event for the world title, Ric Flair versus Tully Blanchard. Now that's interesting because at this point, the Horsemen are not a thing yet. We know it's going to happen. I mean, heck, we've even seen JJ counseling Buddy Landell on the weaknesses of Ric Flair. But Ric Flair is very much a heel. He's on TV doing his heel promos, calling out Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA and putting people down and what have you. Tully Blanchard doing the same thing. He's been in a heck of a feud with Dusty Rhodes. It's a rare heel versus heel, title versus title. What's the thinking here? I mean, clearly it worked. You're the champs here, and we're drawing well. We got $7,700 at the gate, but what's the thinking? Heel versus heel.
Well, you have 2 very good talents right there.
No doubt.
And and Tully, I would have liked to see more of that.
Yeah.
That Flair and Tully, but there again, once Rick is out, we have to have a heel. That's Tully. Tully could have turned babyface in a second. Classic matches. but we had to have a heel, because of Rick being gone so much. But, Tully at that time as a heel, he'd want to be world heavyweight champion, right?
Sure.
So why not? But it worked.
No doubt.
I'd like to have done more of it.
Let's talk about how you're going to close out the month. Toledo, Ohio does $7,400 with the Andersons taking on Thunderbolt and Raging Bull. We've still got our world champ Ric Flair in town. We're going to put him in Columbia, South Carolina, and of course he's going to be on top against Magnum TA. Underneath, a couple of familiar names: Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. The Russians against Slater and Tyler. So Toledo does $7,400. Columbia does $16,100. You've got Flair back again on Friday the 31st. This will wrap up May. $10,400 at your A show in Huntington, West Virginia. Rick Flair, Dick Slater on top. Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff taking on Sawyer and Watley. Underneath, on the B show, I guess you'll call it, Charleston, South Carolina has, once again, that New York street fight with Boogie and Superstar. $5,000 at the gate. Dick Slater as an opponent for Ric Flair. They say styles clash. What'd you think of that pairing?
As far as Dick Slater?
Dick as a challenger for Rick. What'd you think of that?
We did not have enough of Slater interviews, to showcase him for an opponent for Rick. Talent-wise, he was very good, but as far as pushing him into, I saw him more as a heel than a babyface.
That's right.
Dick Slater. So, I don't think he was that comfortable being the babyface.
Yeah, it's weird spot for him.
Yeah. And you could tell it in the interviews. No. I'd like to, he did not do well as a babyface. He's a natural heel.
As we're winding down the month of May 1985, one thing I wanted to ask about, because you had him just for a week, Kim Duck here, DUK, maybe I'm saying it wrong. He actually only wrestles with you guys for like a week. It's at the very end of April and the very beginning of May, and then he's out of here. And he had just been on TV in March of that year with the WWF as Tiger Chung Lee, and he winds up going back to the WWF in July of that year. Why was he only here a week? Why didn't it work out? Do you think there was a bigger opportunity? In hindsight, was there more you guys could have done with him, or was it just not a good fit for some other reason?
He had a bigger opportunity with WWE. That was it.
Okay.
He was good talent. But he's there again. Nobody's going to look after you except you, and so that's what he did. So you can't hold that against him, And I'm glad that we did not spend that much time with him, because he left so soon. Now, he could have fit in, definitely, but it didn't happen.
Anything else you want to mention about May of 85? It's been fun to examine the ins and outs of the business. We know that you've expanded. You're running Georgia. You've had Flair in for a week here of shows. Gates are up. You're running more shows. Maybe we acknowledged at the top. Maybe we're growing a little too fast. Anything else you want to mention from May?
Conrad, I think we're starting to bleed, so to speak. That, yes, too much, too fast. That you're looking at starting to fly people everywhere. The northern cities that the cost doesn't compute. It's to me, I think in some cases it's an ego thing,
right?
Putting it up there. Let's do this, let's do that. No, I was never comfortable with going as far north like Michigan. Sure. You can look at Baltimore. We always did well in Baltimore when we went in. You have to go some places just to see how you do. Philadelphia at times, did well. That was hard to get into that building. Pittsburgh, that was a hard town for us. So yeah, we should have stayed closer at home. Find towns that would work, and then work just on those. Don't go to Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Just because, let's say Backlund says it was a great town. Well, there are a lot of places that were great, but it's sort of like soft drink. Okay, you're raised on Coke. Somebody brings in a Pepsi. Ooh, I don't like that.
Right.
But there again, in the areas that Pepsi was created, they don't like Coke. But then eventually you might be able to get people to drink, the different drinks. And that was a process. But, starting in small towns with a lot of cost to travel, we were bleeding. We started to bleed. And the right people weren't paying attention, I guess you might say. And I'll hold my hand up and say I have some of the blame there.
Well, listen, it's not like it's all bad at this point. I mean, we still got a lot of growing to do. I can't wait to break down the rest of 1985 with you. We'll be back next month talking about June of '85, and we still got a whole lot to talk about with this Great American Bash tour that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it just keeps bigger and bigger and bigger. The momentum that the company has because you're on TV felt like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's also in an era where a lot of the other territories are on their ass and they're really starting to struggle. And the seams will start to show a little bit as everybody's trying to compete with Vince McMahon. And it feels like if anybody's going to, it's going to be the Crockett's. I mean, there's no other real competition. So the wrestling world is really paying attention to what you guys are doing and what Vince is doing. And we'll talk about that next month in June. This was, I don't know how to thank you enough, man. This is the most fun thing I record every month. It's so cool to dig back through this wrestling history and try to learn a thing or two and then try to apply it to what's happening today.
Conrad, I thank you so much for allowing me to do this. Really appreciate it. Now, I do have one question at the end. I had a question from a fan that saw our first broadcast.
Yes.
And they say, how do I get the others? So I don't know what to tell them.
They're all here on adfreeshows.com. They just hadn't been in the right place, but direct them to me and we'll get them in the right place because this is the place to be. And we'll see you guys here next month right here on The Book.